Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Moats. We're now in the month of April, and mowing season has started in earnest here where I live. The temperatures are rising, we're getting more rain, the grass is turning that darker, healthier looking green, and it's starting to grow like mad. Unfortunately, because I'm still recovering from back surgery in February, I'm not allowed to mow my lawn this year, and I had to hire someone for the first time. The service I hired has done a really nice job so far, but I enjoy cutting my own grass. My surgeon says that if recovery goes well, I should be back on the riding mower in 2026. But enough about lawn care. Let's talk about today's book. It's the first story of the classic Han Solo adventures. Han and Chewie are trying to make their fortunes in the corporate sector when the two stumble upon a conspiracy by the government to disappear criminals and other people they consider irritations. Now the smugglers find themselves on a rescue mission to find the captives and free them from a notorious prison. It's Han Solo at Star's End by Brian Daley, a favorite of fans who have been reading Star Wars stories since the late 70s. I'll talk about the story coming up in just a few minutes. But first, it's listener question time. Today's email comes from Luke, who says, "What is it about Star Wars that you find compelling? I've tried other fictional universes like Harry Potter, The Lord of the Rings, and How to Train Your Dragon, but none of them are as rich and lived in as Star Wars feels to me. Personally, I prefer The Hobbit to The Lord of the Rings, but I keep coming back to Star Wars. What are your thoughts?" Well, thank you very much for the email, Luke. I'm kind of in the same boat you are. I've never really gotten into other fictional universes nearly as deeply as Star Wars. The closest thing for me would probably be the Game of Thrones / A Song of Ice and Fire universe, or the Star Trek universe, but I'm not nearly as immersed in those as I am in Star Wars. It's probably because I'm not as much of a fan of high fantasy stories or hard sci-fi as many people. And I've never really gotten into superhero stories like Marvel or DC Comics. And that's fine. I've seen a lot of other stuff. I've watched the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies, but try as I might, I can't read the books. And I've tried 5 different times. I just don't get into Tolkien's writing style. I watched the Marvel Infinity Wars saga. It was fun, but it didn't make me interested in reading any of the comics. Now, I have read the 5 main books in the Song of Ice and Fire saga that HBO made into the Game of Thrones series, and I like both the books and the show. But my interests focus mostly on the political infighting surrounding King's Landing. Cersei, Tywin, Tyrion, Eddard, Catelyn, Sansa, and the Tyrells. I don't find a lot of the stuff surrounding Bran and Jon and Daenerys, the White Walkers, the dragons, nearly as compelling. And it's the same with Star Wars. I love the saga, but my favorite parts surround the family story of the Skywalkers, the struggle of the rebellion against the Empire, and the political alliances and machinations between the different people in the galaxy. I'm not as much into the Force-centric parts of the story, even though I understand just how important the Force is to Star Wars. So, why do some stories really resonate with you and others don't? Maybe it's a character that you identify with, or it's a time in your life when the story finds you, or it's the fans that accept you into their community and become some of your best friends. Who knows? Part of my enjoyment of Game of Thrones / A Song of Ice and Fire stems from all the friends I've made in that fandom, like folks that joined me to cover the new Jedi Order series back in 2023. I met Kat, Jay, Matt, K2, and Scott talking about the A Song of Ice and Fire books back in the 20-teens. Now, the reason I follow Star Trek a little bit is probably because my dad enjoyed the original series when he was a teenager in the 60s, and I watched reruns of the series with him in the 80s. Once again, thank you for the question, Luke. Listener, if you have a question for the show, send me an email at swlegendslounge@gmail.com or send me a message on Twitter, Instagram, or Blue Sky at swlegendslounge. And if you'd like to get your voice on the show, just record a short message and email it in. But please record it in MP3 audio format. Coming up at the end of the show, we'll hear from Luke again as he wanted to share his history with Star Wars with me. You'll want to stick around for that. But now it's time for today's book, Han Solo at Star's End by Brian Daley. Grab yourself a drink. Let's head in to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. The story begins in the corporate sector, an area of the Outer Rim controlled by the businesses and the corporations in the area that the Empire mostly leaves alone to govern itself. Han and Chewie land on the planet Sarlukhef, hoping to make repairs to the Millennium Falcon with the help of some outlaw mechanics. The leader of the outlaw techs, a woman named Jessa Vandangant, tells Han she'll repair the Falcon if he and Chewie agree to extract 4 people from the planet Oron 3 and bring them back to Sarkulef. Now, before they depart, Jessa gets word that the Corporate Sector Authority is about to raid her base. She convinces Han to lead a ragtag squadron to defend the base. Jessa has 6 Z-95 headhunters, and she, Han, and 4 other outlaw tech pilots fly out to meet the 4 CorpSec IRD fighters that drop out of hyperspace. Han divides the squadron into 3 two-person wings. The outlaw techs start off pretty well, fending off the first attack by the IRD fighters, destroying one of the attackers. But it's obvious which side has more experience. The 3 remaining IRDs quickly separate the Z-95 pairs. The IRDs destroy 2 of the Z-95s, and then 2 of the attackers strafe the base, while Han and the remaining defenders chase after them. Eventually, they pick off the IRDs, but not before the outlaw techs lose another fighter. The battle ends up 3-on-1, with Han distracting the final fighter, allowing Jessa to take advantage and blow it away. After the battle, Han and Chewie prepare to leave for Oron 3. Jessa and her outlaw techs disguise the Millennium Falcon inside a cargo barge. The camouflage will allow Han to pilot the barge from inside the Falcon, and then shed the barge shell if he needs to make a quick escape. In addition to the barge, Jessa also tells Han he'll be flying with a pair of droids. Bollux is an old, outdated labor droid. He's nothing special, except Bollux has another droid hidden inside his chest. Blue Max is a super state-of-the-art computer that Jessa says is designed to infiltrate and download valuable information from the Oron 3 databases. Han and Chewie land on Oron 3 and meet up with one of their passengers, a human named Reckon. Reckon is the leader of a group of people trying to locate the people that the Corporate Sector Authority is abducting. When Han asks where the other 3 passengers are, Reckon says they'll be there soon, but he warns Han to be careful. Reckon believes one of the others is a traitor. Reckon takes Blue Max out of Bollux, and he and Han enter a data center where Reckon was working undercover. He uses Blue Max to infiltrate the Authority's system. While Max is downloading the information, the other passengers arrive. A human named Torm, whose father and brother have disappeared, and a pair of feline Triani, Atoir and her cub Paka. Atoir is looking for her mate, Kihin. Atoir says they haven't heard from their local contact, but before Reckon can do anything about it, Blue Max pipes up. The little supercomputer is finished stealing the information. But the police are on the way. The group flees the data center and steals a huge agricultural droid. The police soon catch up and attack the droid and capture Chewbacca. Han tries to help Chewie, but Reckon stops him. The group escapes back to the Falcon, still hidden in the cargo barge. The barge lifts off, but is cut off in orbit by an Authority dreadnought and is caught in a tractor beam. Han breaks free by dumping thousands of tons of grain to overload the tractor beam, and then launches the Falcon out of the barge's cargo hold. After they jump to hyperspace, Han leaves the cockpit and heads back to the passenger lounge. There, he finds Reckon lying on the gaming table, dead. But Reckon wrote a final message in blood: Star's End, Midas 7. Han erases the message and then calls the others into the lounge. He wants to speak to each one alone to try to find out who murdered Reckon. During his interrogations, Han says they're headed to a prison in the Midas system. But he tells each passenger that Star's End is located on a different planet, none of them the correct one. When Han gathers everyone back together, he asks them to write down where they can find the prison. Torm writes down Midas 7, the correct answer. Han jumps the traitor, and the two fight down the Falcon's passageway. Eventually, Torm breaks free and jumps into a side compartment. Too late, he realizes he's in the Falcon's airlock. Frantically, Torm pleads with Han, trying to cut a deal. But Han, still reeling from Chewie's abduction, slaps the eject button and launches the traitor into space. The Falcon arrives at Midas 7. Han, the Triani, and the droids land at Star's End disguised as Imperial entertainers. They introduce themselves as Madame Artoir's roving performers and are quickly taken to meet the Warden, Corporate Sector Authority Vice President Merkovig Herkin. Herkin says he was expecting a gladiator droid to battle his Mark X executioner droid. Herkin is skeptical that Bollux will give the Mark X much of a challenge, but he agrees to allow the troop to entertain his workers. While Atoir and Paka dance and tumble, Han tells Herkin that he needs to repair Bollux's internal computer before the droid can battle the Mark X. Han and Blue Max head to the prison's maintenance area and jack into the facility's computer network. They find Chewie, Kihin, Jess's father Doc, and all the other prisoners that have been abducted. They're being held in suspended animation. Han tells Blue Max to wake the prisoners up, but the little supercomputer says he can't do that. Only the receiver on the Warden's belt can deactivate the stasis fields. Han tells Blue Max to prepare Star's End to self-destruct. He'll take care of the Warden and free the prisoners. Back at the amphitheater, Herkin tires of watching Artoir and Paka dance and tumble. He wants to see his gladiator droid destroy Bollux. To make things a little more entertaining, Herkin gives Bollux a shield and then orders the Mark X to attack. Bollux uses the shield to block the gladiator droid's weapons as best as he can, but it's only a matter of time before one of the Mark X's attacks will get past his defenses. Just then, Han and Blue Max arrive. Han tells Atwar and Paka the plan to release the prisoners and then continues down to the amphitheater, while the Triani sneak away to the Millennium Falcon. When Han and Blue Max see Bollux struggling against the Gladiator droid, the little supercomputer transmits a quick burst of information and tells Bollux how to beat the Mark X. The old labor droid throws himself beneath the Gladiator droid and grabs the underside of its chassis. Hidden in the one spot the Mark X cannot reach, Bollux starts ripping out the Gladiator droid's cooling circuits. The Mark X starts overheating and races around the amphitheater with Bollux still clinging to its undercarriage, ripping out more and more circuitry. Herkin screams at Han to stop Bollux, but it's too late. The Mark X heads straight toward the wall of the arena. Bollux lets go and rolls away, just in time, as the Gladiator droid slams into the wall and explodes. Furious at the loss of the Mark X, Herkin orders Han to a duel with one of his henchmen. But just then, Star's End's self-destruct begins. The power plant explodes, launching the prison into the atmosphere. While Herkin and the guards are distracted, Han and the droids race down to the main prison level and wake up the prisoners. They find Chewie and Jessa's father, Doc. Together, they lead the prisoners to the engineering level, hoping that Doc can do something to stop the prison from crashing back to the surface. However, one of the Star's End assault ships arrives with reinforcements and docks with the prison. Han and the prisoners find themselves trapped. Herkin orders the Authority troops to fire, and the prisoners quickly begin taking casualties. Just then, Atwar and Paka arrive in the Millennium Falcon. They dock beside the Authority assault ship. Han orders the prisoners to rush the reinforcements. They break through and load up on the Falcon and the assault ship. Realizing Star's End is starting to plummet back to the surface, Herkin pleads with Han to take him with them. Before Han can answer, Herkin's wife shoots him in the back, killing him. The two ships pull away and jump to hyperspace, just as the notorious prison slams down onto the surface of Midas 7. The story ends with the Millennium Falcon landing on the planet Erdur. Doc reunites with Jessa and agrees to build a new body for Bollux and Blue Max. Jessa promises Han and Chewie to retrofit the Falcon with even more less than legal upgrades. Time to take a break. When I return, I'll talk more about Han Solo at Star's End. I'm Aaron Moats. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. Thank you for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, where we celebrate the books from Star Wars Legends. But let me take a moment and recommend a book from Star Wars canon. Thrawn Alliances is the story of how the Grand Admiral first met Darth Vader. The two team up to stop an Imperial threat on the backwater planet Batuu. The mission causes Thrawn to remember a trip he made to Batuu for the Chiss Expeditionary Forces, and Lord Vader reminds him an awful lot like a young Republic general he met there years before. Check out Thrawn Alliances by Timothy Zahn. Welcome back to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Moats, and today I'm talking about the novel Han Solo at Star's End by Brian Daley. Han Solo at Star's End is the first of the 3 Han Solo adventures, published in 1979 and 1980. For many people, it was their introduction into Star Wars on the written page. And for many people, this is their favorite Star Wars novel. It's a quick read. It's only about 180 pages. It's a fast, fun adventure. It's got mystery. It's got excitement. It's got a Western shootout. And it's all packed into a story surrounding Han Solo. Han Solo at Star's End is a prequel. It takes place before the events of A New Hope. When Brian Daley was commissioned to write the Han Solo adventures, George Lucas at the time asked him to avoid some of the stories about the Empire. So, we got an adventure novel featuring the galaxy's most lovable smuggler and his loyal friend and co-pilot, Chewbacca. Daley invented the corporate sector, an area of the galaxy that is technically owned by the Empire, but the Empire basically leaves it to its own devices to govern itself. Han and Chewie try to make their fortune in the corporate sector, smuggling goods past different planetary authorities, allowing their clients to avoid the taxes and tariffs levied by the corporate sector authority. They're not the only smugglers in the area, of course. The corporate sector is rife with a healthy black market. And as people in the sector continue to buy illegal products and making the authority lose money, the authority starts to crack down on people it considers dissidents. Those people start to disappear. Han at this point doesn't like to get involved in politics, doesn't like to get involved in these types of situations. He just wants to make money. He's got a soft spot for Jessa and Doc, the leaders of the outlaw mechanics, because they've worked on the Millennium Falcon before. The book talks about how Han and Jessa once had a romantic relationship, and Jessa uses that to appeal to Han for help when her father goes missing. Reluctantly, Han agrees. When he travels to Orin 3 to pick up the leader of the group who is searching for the people who have been abducted, Reckon, Han learns that Reckon's group has been compromised. There's a traitor in their midst. Someone is feeding information to the corporate sector authority. Reckon is unable to discover who that traitor is before he is killed. But he gives Han a message. He allows Han the opportunity to sniff out who the traitor is. And Han learns by telling each of the 3 passengers he has that they are traveling to a different planet in the Midas system. When he convenes them all later, he asks them to write down the name of the planet that they're traveling to, and Torm does not write down the name of the planet that Han told him, but instead writes down Midas 7, the correct answer, outing himself as the traitor. That was one of my favorite parts of the story. I don't think Han gets credit enough sometimes for how clever he is. It's overshadowed by some of the bluster and bravado that Han Solo likes to portray, especially the Han Solo at this point in the timeline. But Han has always been clever. And I just like that we get a glimpse of it here in this story. That cleverness continues in the plan to infiltrate the prison and to free the prisoners. They intercept a message that an Imperial entertainment troupe is not going to be able to make it to Star's End. So Han decides to disguise himself, Bollux, and the two Triani and take the place of the entertainers. From all the descriptions in the book, they do a pretty good job of entertaining the guards who have been kind of stuck here on Star's End for years. The only person that isn't entertained by it is the warden, Hyrkin. And that's because he's a big fan of BattleBots. He just wants to see two droids go at it, and he hopes that his gladiator droid will be the one to come out on top. Once again, we see our heroes prevail. This time it's Blue Max who works out how to defeat the gladiator droid, signals it to Bollux. We get the really fun visual of this small, old, out-of-date labor droid diving between the treads of the gladiator droid, grabbing up underneath its chassis where the Mark X can't reach it, and then Bollux holding on with one hand and just ripping out parts, wires, circuits from the underside of the Mark X, making the droid go haywire. It might be my favorite visual in the story. Eventually, of course, we know the good guys must prevail. Han is able to free Chewie, free the other prisoners, and with the help of Artois and Paka, load as many as they can on the Falcon, and they take the Authority ship and load it up with the remaining prisoners. When I say I like fast-paced stories in general, this is an example of the type of story I'm talking about. I know folks love the Han Solo trilogy by A.C. Crispin, written in the late 90s. I really enjoy those books too. But as much as I like those stories, they don't move as quickly as this one does. This may be the fastest moving story in Legends. At least as far as novels go. I'm sure some of the young reader books move a lot quicker. But this story moves. It keeps your attention. And it's been a long time since I've read the Han Solo adventures. But I am hopeful that the remaining two stories move as quickly as this one does. Well, it's almost time for me to go, but first, I have another message from Luke, who wanted to share his opinion about his journey through a galaxy far, far away. Luke says, "My introduction to Star Wars was when I went to see The Force Awakens in the cinema with my mates, and I loved it. Rey was such an interesting character. It wasn't until after I saw The Last Jedi that my dad showed me the original trilogy. I then took it upon myself to watch the prequels. I fell in love with the characters from both trilogies. After a while, I got a Disney Plus subscription and started watching the Clone Wars. Anakin was fast becoming my favorite character, and now I prefer the prequels to the original trilogy or the sequels. I understand that many of the things in those movies don't work for some people, but I will always have a soft spot for them because that's what I grew up with." Thank you very much for sharing your journey with me, Luke. Send me an email and let me know how far you've gotten through the Star Wars television shows. Did you finish the Clone Wars? Did you watch any of the other animated shows? Have you dove into the live action shows? Which ones are your favorites? And which ones do you bump up against? Let me know. Listener, if you have something you'd like to share with me, a question, opinion, comment, you can send me an email at swlegendslounge@gmail.com or send me a message on Twitter, Instagram, or Blue Sky at swlegendslounge. And don't forget to send in your favorite Star Wars character groupings. I love reading those messages. Now, coming up on the next episode, we continue through the Han Solo adventures with the second book, Han Solo's Revenge by Brian Daley. You can look forward to that episode coming out on April 18th. Thank you so much for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. I'm Aaron Moats. May the Force be with you. And remember, there's always a bit of truth in legends.